There's a quiet lie sitting at the center of modern estate planning advice. It doesn't scream, it doesn't look dangerous. In fact, it often comes dressed as guidance, responsible, even helpful. It says that if you put your home into a living trust, you have solved the hard part. It says the paperwork itself creates peace. It says the title change is the win. Now listen, a living trust can be useful. For some families, it is a smart move. It can make things smoother. It can help avoid probate. It can keep some matters more private. But that is not the same as saying it is always simple, always harmless, or always the first thing you should rush to do with the roof over your head. Think of your retirement like a house foundation. The foundation is your income, your expenses, your health, your taxes, and the people who may depend on you later. The furniture is everything you place on top of that. A trust can be part of the furniture. Helpful, yes. Important, maybe. But if the foundation underneath is cracked, the nice furniture will not save the house. The real question isn't whether putting your home in a living trust sounds sophisticated. It's whether doing it actually strengthens your life, your plan, and your family's options. That is a very different question. And if you ask the wrong one, you can quietly end up solving a paperwork problem while missing the money problem, the care problem, or the family problem sitting right beside it. A lot of people hear the phrase living trust and feel immediate relief. It sounds organized. It sounds protective. It sounds like the kind of thing responsible adults do when they finally get serious. But words can create comfort faster than facts. And your house is usually not a small asset. It is often the biggest thing with your name on it, the most emotional thing, and the one mistake people feel for years. One quick thing before we dive in, if you're not subscribed, hit that button now. I think you'll want to stick around. Imagine walking onto a car lot. Every vehicle has a sticker price, bold, official, and almost a little intimidating. But nobody wise stops at the sticker. You ask what is hidden, what changes later, what the monthly cost really becomes. A living trust deserves that same kind of second look, because the shiny label can make people feel safe before they understand what they are really agreeing to. The first disadvantage is simple, and it catches people off guard. A living trust can create a false feeling of completion. You sign documents, retitle the home, maybe place the folder in a drawer, and your mind quietly says, good, that part is handled. But a title change is not a retirement plan. It is not a long-term care plan. It is not an income plan. It is not a conflict-proof family plan. That false calm matters because your house does not pay your electric bill just because it sits inside a trust. It does not cover groceries. It does not make Medicare premiums easier. It does not erase inflation. Retirement isn't about how much you've accumulated. It's about whether your income can support your life. And some people spend so much time polishing the legal shell around the home that they ignore the cash flow living inside the rest of the plan. Think about a backpack you've carried all day. At first, you barely notice it. Then your shoulders begin talking to you. Then you realize the weight was there the whole time. That is how financial stress works when people confuse estate planning with retirement security. The trust may look neat on paper, but the pressure of monthly costs, rising insurance, taxes, and healthcare still sits on your back. I have seen this play out in very ordinary ways. Someone says their home is protected because it is in a trust, but they are still pulling too much from savings every month. Someone else says their children will avoid probate, but they have no idea how a surviving spouse would handle the house payment if one Social Security check disappears. They feel organized. Quietly, they are still exposed where it matters most. That leads to the second disadvantage. Putting your home into a living trust can create extra paperwork and title headaches at exactly the wrong time. People often imagine the transfer as one signature and done. Sometimes it is smooth, sometimes it is not. County records must be right. The deed must be right. The trust name must match correctly. If anything is sloppy, the mess usually shows up later, not sooner. And later is when people are tired. Later is when someone is selling the house, refinancing it, taking a home equity line, or handling an illness. Later is when a surviving spouse is already overwhelmed. Small title mistakes are like tiny cracks in a windshield. At first they seem harmless, then the weather changes, the road bumps, the crack spreads. What felt minor becomes the thing slowing everything down. Here is where perceived data and real data quietly split apart. Perceived data says, my home is in a trust, so the property side of my plan is clean. Real data asks, is the deed recorded? Is the insurance updated? Is the lender notified if needed? Is the homestead status preserved? And do the people involved know how this actually works? Those are not the same story. And the second story is the one your family has to live in. Let me ask you something. Do you know what your monthly income will actually look like when you retire? Be honest with yourself. Because a lot of legal planning gets done in a fog of financial uncertainty. People tidy the documents while the budget stays blurry, and blurry numbers create very expensive surprises. The third disadvantage is one that stings because people rarely expect it. A living trust usually does not protect your home from your own creditors. It does not magically shield the property from lawsuits against you. It does not hide the house from long-term care costs. And it does not turn the home into some invisible fortress the government cannot see. That is a very common misunderstanding. Think of Social Security as a safety net. You paid into it your whole life, and when you claim it, the net catches part of your spending needs. A living trust is not like that. It is not a safety net under your wealth. It is mostly a container with instructions. Useful, yes, but a container and a shield are not the same thing. Confusing those two can quietly shape terrible decisions. This matters most when people start thinking about nursing home costs or Medicaid planning. They hear a neighbor say, just put the house in a trust. They hear a relative say, that keeps it safe. But a standard revocable living trust usually does not remove the home from your control in the way asset protection planning would require. In plain English, you still own the benefits. So many risks still point right back at you. That is why you need to slow down anytime someone sells the trust, as if it solves everything. It doesn't. It can avoid probate. That is real. It can simplify some transfers. That is real too. But if the problem you are actually trying to solve is creditor protection, tax planning, or nursing home spend down, the trust may quietly be the wrong tool for the job. And once you use the wrong tool, other parts of the plan start bending around it. Maybe you avoid better planning because you think the house is already handled. Maybe you delay talking to an elder law attorney. Maybe you keep spending as if the home is untouchable. That is how one misunderstanding quietly multiplies into 3 or 4 more. Numbers matter, but how you feel about those numbers, that matters just as much. The fourth disadvantage is that refinancing or borrowing against the home can become more annoying than people expect. Not impossible, just annoying. Some lenders are relaxed about trust-owned homes. Others want the property moved back out of the trust before closing. Some want extra documents, some want more explanation. And when timing matters, extra steps feel much heavier than they sound in a calm office. Picture a faucet connected to a pipe. Behind that faucet is pressure built over time. In retirement, your financial pressure builds the same way. A market drop, a roof leak, a spouse getting sick, property taxes rising, all of it starts building force inside the plan. If you suddenly need to tap home equity and the lender says we need title changes first, that delay can feel a lot bigger than a simple clerical issue. This is especially important if your house is a major backup asset in retirement. A lot of people are house rich and cash cautious. They tell themselves that if life gets tight, they can refinance, downsize, or draw from equity later. Maybe, but later is rarely neat. Later often arrives during stress, and anything that slows access to flexibility deserves more attention than most brochures give it. You may already have what people with millions are searching for: flexibility. But flexibility only helps if it is real. A home inside a trust might still be usable, still sellable, still financeable. Yet each extra step can nudge the process from easy to irritating. And when you are older, grieving, or under deadline, irritating is not small. Irritating is expensive in energy, time, and sometimes money. The fifth disadvantage sits quietly in the tax and benefit corners, where people often do not look until something goes wrong. A living trust usually does not destroy the basic tax treatment of your home by itself, but mistakes around it can affect exemptions, paperwork, and local property rules. That means you cannot just sign and forget. You need follow-through. Boring follow-through, yes, but very real follow-through. Inflation is like an ice cube in the sun. It does not disappear all at once. It melts slowly, quietly, and without asking your permission. Property taxes do that. Insurance premiums do that. Repair bills do that. If your income is flat and your pension has no cost of living adjustment, those little nudges matter even more. So when home planning creates even a small tax mistake, the damage can quietly last for years. This is where the big number myth hurts people. They say, my home is worth $900,000, so I must be fine. But your house value is not the same as spendable retirement income. It is not the same as cash flow. It is not the same as margin. A high-value home with rising costs can make someone feel wealthy on paper and pinched in real life. That gap between appearance and daily comfort is bigger than most people admit. I want you to picture retirement in 2 piles, not one giant pile. 2. Pile 1 is income that keeps showing up whether the market is cheerful or moody. Social Security, a pension, maybe an annuity. Pile 2 is money you have to manage, protect, and pull from carefully over time. Savings, investments, home equity. A lot of people stare at pile 2 because it looks bigger, but pile 1 is what keeps the lights on. That matters when your home goes into a trust. The trust may change where the deed sits, but it does not move the house from pile 2 into pile 1. Unless you sell the property, borrow against it, or create income from it, the house remains wealth you must manage, not cash that quietly arrives on schedule. And that difference can change how secure you really are when retirement stops being theory and becomes Tuesday. Think about a pantry full of food and a paycheck hitting your account. Both matter, both help you live, but they help in different ways. A full pantry feels good. A paycheck pays the next bill. Your home is often like the pantry, valuable, comforting, useful, but not the same as monthly income. When people forget that, they start treating their home value like proof that the whole plan is stronger than it really is. I want to know, have you ever compared your retirement plan to someone else's and felt behind? That feeling isn't always accurate. Sometimes the person with the smaller house, smaller account, and quieter life is standing on steadier ground because their income floor is higher and their costs are lower. Sometimes the impressive house is really a demanding one. That is why the title alone never tells the whole story. Let me tell you about Patricia and Ruth. Patricia is 67. She spent 35 years as a school nurse and lives in a paid-off ranch house outside Columbus. She has about $280,000 in savings, a modest pension, and Social Security that covers most of her core bills. Ruth is 65. She worked in corporate purchasing, owns a beautiful house in a growing suburb near Phoenix, and has $840,000 saved. On paper, Ruth looks stronger. The house is nicer, the account is bigger, the lifestyle looks more polished, but Ruth also has higher property taxes, higher insurance, more upkeep, and a retirement plan that depends on larger withdrawals. Patricia looks quieter from the outside, but her monthly life is steadier. She knows what comes in, she knows what goes out. It's not about who has more saved, it's about who has more certainty. Now imagine both women place their homes into living trusts. Patricia uses it as one part of a careful plan. Ruth uses it as proof that everything is handled. That difference matters. Patricia still checks expenses. She still looks at her pension, her Social Security timing, and her emergency fund. Ruth feels relief and stops asking harder questions. Same legal tool, very different emotional result. The sixth disadvantage is family confusion. A living trust is supposed to reduce chaos, but if you do not explain it well, it can create a different kind of chaos. Children may not understand who the successor trustee is. A spouse may not understand what needs to happen if you become sick. An unmarried partner may assume rights they do not actually have. Silence turns paperwork into mystery, and mystery turns grief into conflict. Think about a relay race. Even when both runners are strong, the handoff still matters. That is what home planning looks like when one spouse dies or becomes unable to manage the property. The trust may name the next person clearly, but if the family never talked about repairs, sale timing, debts, or who can live in the house, the baton can still hit the ground. Legal clarity is not the same as emotional clarity. This gets sharper in blended families. If one spouse wants the survivor to stay in the house, but the children from a first marriage expect a future share, the trust language matters. The timing matters. The communication matters. A living trust can help manage that. It can also expose it, because once the home sits inside a formal document, every unspoken assumption quietly becomes a legal question. Here is a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? Not the vague version, the real version. Who handles the deed? Who pays the bills? Whether the house gets sold? Whether one person can afford to stay? Those answers matter more than the elegant binder on the shelf. And remember what happens with Social Security for many couples. When one spouse dies, one check usually disappears, and the larger one remains. That changes the survivor's income floor. If the house is expensive to keep, or if the trust assumes the survivor can stay indefinitely without looking at cash flow, you may quietly hand someone a legal right they cannot financially support. That is not kindness. That is delayed stress. The seventh disadvantage is the hardest one to see because it feels so reasonable. A living trust can make people hold on to the house longer than they should. Once the property is placed into a carefully built structure, the house starts to feel even more central, more important, almost more sacred. People tell themselves, we already planned around this house, so we should keep it. But good planning should preserve options, not trap you inside them. Think of a young tree in a dry summer. If you keep cutting branches while it is trying to recover, it struggles harder. That is sequence of returns risk in retirement. Bad market years hurt more early if you are withdrawing at the same time. Now add an oversized house, rising costs, and a refusal to downsize because the home is tucked inside a trust and emotionally labeled as part of the plan. That pressure can quietly force more withdrawals when you can least afford them. This is where income matters more than assets. If your pension, Social Security, annuity income, or part-time work covers most of your basics, you can make housing choices from strength. If not, the house can quietly become a beautiful hostage. Valuable? Yes. But demanding? Expensive? Stubborn. The real question isn't whether the house is protected inside a trust. It's whether keeping that house protects your life. Quick check. Do you know your full retirement age for Social Security? Most people don't, and that matters here more than you might think. If claiming at 62 means locking in a smaller check while trying to carry a costly house, that is one story. If waiting until 67 or 70 raises the income floor enough to keep the home comfortably, that is another. The house decision and the income decision speak to each other. This is why I tell people not to admire the structure before they test the cash flow. A trust can help pass a house. It cannot create monthly margin. Your mortgage status matters, your taxes matter, your insurance matters, your repair history matters, your health matters. If your retirement budget only works when nothing breaks, then the issue is not whether the home avoids probate. The issue is that the plan is too tight. And let that sink in. Some people with modest homes and modest savings are stronger than they look because their costs are low and their income floor is steady. Other people with beautiful homes and large accounts are more fragile than they appear because the carrying costs quietly eat at them every month. Real data shows what your life costs. Perceived data shows what your house is worth. Those are not the same thing. There is another layer here that people almost never discuss: insurance. After a home is transferred into a living trust, the insurance company may need to update how the trust is listed. Sometimes it is simple. Sometimes the details are annoying. If the policy and the title drift out of sync, you do not want to discover that during a claim after a storm, a fire, or a liability issue. Quiet paperwork errors love urgent moments. You do not need to fear that, but you do need to respect it. A house is not just an asset. It is a place where risk lives in physical form. Pipes burst, trees fall, guests slip, roofs leak. If the trust changes, ownership language, and the insurance never catches up, your family may inherit more confusion, not less. That is the opposite of what most people think they are buying when they create the trust. Here is something I get asked all the time. Is it better to save more or guarantee more income? What do you think? Because home planning sits right in the middle of that question. A house can make your net worth look larger, but net worth is not the same as sleep. Net worth is not the same as groceries. Net worth is not the same as the calm of knowing the bills are covered before you open the Market app. That is why Patricia sleeps better than people expect. Her pension is not huge. Her Social Security is not dramatic. But together they cover housing, food, utilities, and insurance. Her savings are support money, not survival money. The house fits the life. Ruth has more money, but the house asks more from the plan. That is a different emotional climate. One woman glances at statements. The other refreshes them. Stop measuring yourself against everyone else. Start focusing on what truly gives you freedom. Freedom may be a paid-off smaller house. Freedom may be choosing not to put the home into a trust until you understand the full picture. Freedom may be using a trust, but only after your spouse understands it, your deed is right, your insurance is updated, and your income plan can actually carry the property without strain. Here is something most people never consider. Do you know the difference between what you need and what you want in retirement? The house sits right in the middle of that question. You may want to keep the family home forever. You may need a one-story place, closer to medical care. You may want the big yard. You may need lower upkeep. A trust can preserve the house. It cannot decide whether the house still serves your body and your budget. And that brings us to the practical side. If you are thinking about putting your home into a living trust, the first step is not to sign anything. The first step is to write down what problem you are trying to solve. Probate delay, privacy, control after incapacity, blended family concerns, something else. Because if you do not name the actual problem, any polished solution can feel right for about 10 minutes. The second step is to run your real monthly numbers before you touch the deed. Housing costs, insurance, property taxes, repairs, utilities, healthcare, food, transportation. Then place your dependable income beside those costs. Pension, Social Security, any annuity, any truly reliable work income. Do not build your plan on vibes. Build it on the life you actually pay for every month. The third step is to stress test the house itself. Ask what happens if property taxes rise for 10 years. Ask what happens if your pension has no cost of living adjustment while insurance keeps climbing. Ask what happens if one spouse dies and one Social Security check disappears. Ask what happens if a roof, HVAC system, or foundation issue shows up in the same year the market is down. It's not pessimism, it's realism. And in this case, realism isn't negative, it's empowering. The fourth step is to review the trust with the people who would actually be affected. Your spouse, your adult children, the person who may become successor trustee. Not every detail has to become family theater, but silence is expensive. If the home is meant to be sold, say that. If someone can stay there for a while, say that. If the house may need to fund care later, say that too. The fifth step is to make sure the boring details are boring in the best way. Confirm the deed was recorded. Confirm the insurance matches. Confirm any local tax or homestead issues were reviewed. Confirm how your lender handles trust-owned property if refinancing ever becomes necessary. The point is not to create more fear. The point is to remove future friction while you are calm enough to do it well. Now that matters deeply. Now listen carefully. I am not telling you never to put your home into a living trust. Sometimes it is exactly the right move. What I am telling you is that the trust should be the servant of the plan, not the star of the plan. If it supports your goals, great. If it distracts you from your goals, that is a problem. A legal tool should not become emotional wallpaper covering deeper cracks. You are not behind. In fact, you may already be standing on one of the strongest financial foundations available today, but only if you see the whole picture. The house, the income, the survivor plan, the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, the possibility that the right answer later may be to sell, simplify, move closer to help, or free up cash flow instead of preserving a property at all costs. A living trust can help transfer a home. It cannot tell you whether that home still fits your life. That judgment comes from clarity. It comes from honest math. It comes from asking whether the property supports your retirement or silently competes with it. And when you ask that question, something shifts. You stop being impressed by appearances. You start becoming loyal to function. Think about this. There are people with beautiful houses and trusts who still feel pinched every month. And there are people in modest homes, sometimes with no trust at all, who feel steady because their income, expenses, and choices fit together. The difference isn't the document. The difference is understanding. Understanding what the home does for you, what it costs you, and what role it should play in the years ahead. Retirement isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of something new. A new rhythm, a new pace, a new way of living. And the goal isn't just to survive it. The goal is to enjoy it, to wake up without financial stress, to make decisions without fear, to live with confidence, not hesitation. Before you go, if this helped you see your retirement differently, subscribe. There's more where this came from.